Hello, everyone. Welcome to week 6. Welcome to today's session on the questions that you ask as a job candidate as opposed to the interviewer. So the interviewer will be asking you questions, but they're questions that you will also bring to the table as the job candidate. That's what we're talking about here. Why? Let's start with the big why. Why should the job candidate even have any questions? Why should the job candidate bring questions to the job interview? One of the biggest things that recruiters and hiring managers love to see is that the job candidate has researched the company, that the job candidate has actually explored what the company is, maybe even looked at some public filings, certainly looked at press releases, looked at the website, seen what's in the news. We love to see that. For context, I've been a chief people officer at a company that went from 150 employees to 650 employees. So we grew a lot. I interviewed a lot of people. I was in charge of the talent acquisition part of the company. So I want to give you the things that we internally love to see about people that we then promote further, that we move to the hiring manager stage and so on. Some of you are saying it shows your interest in the company. Okay, I love this answer. So one of you just said, and this is my first bullet point in the workbook that accompanies this session. My first answer is this is a two-way interview. You are interviewing the company and the company is interviewing you. I know that sounds a little cliche when you're in a situation when you actually want a job. You want a job and you're like, all right, Senya, how much should I be interviewing the company? But you also don't want to end up in a situation where you thought it was apples and it's oranges. You don't want to end up in a situation where you thought the company culture was something, but you never asked about it and you never got more detail and it turns out to be something else. Or the job responsibilities you thought from the written job description were something, but you just don't ask any more detail and you end up in a place that's not your place, not the place you want to be. I know your skepticism because I have it too. Like, Senya, don't I want to be kind of on the nice side and the good side and let the person interview me and be very responsive? You do. You absolutely want to be responsive. You don't want to be this bulldozer during this interview in which you are the job candidate. At the same time, you want to, in a kind, friendly, engaging, back and forth way, you want to find out about the company too. Furthermore, and related that it's a two-way interview, let's say you still don't buy all my points on that. Let's say you still say, okay, Senya, fine, it's a two-way interview, but so. When I have spoken with recruiters, and again, I invite the recruiters who are on the call right now to chime in once I say this. When I have spoken to recruiters, to people who lead talent acquisition for companies, and I've asked, what makes a great interview? What do you most enjoy? What makes you more likely to move this person forward to the next stage in the process? The number one thing that comes back, I mean huge, number one by a landslide, the number one thing that comes back is the thing in an interview that will make me most likely to move this person forward is if it feels like a conversation. I heard this years and years ago, and I just heard this last week as well from a global head of recruiting for a multinational company. But years and years ago, I heard this from a really good friend of mine. And they said, really, a conversation? That seems almost too basic. But my friend years ago told me, Senya, you wouldn't believe it. You wouldn't believe how many people come to an interview. They're prepared, they're professional, they're efficient, they're effective. And it doesn't feel like it flows. It doesn't feel like there's a back and forth. So there's something about that humanness, that back and forthness that's important to recruiters. And that's also important to hiring managers. What do you think of those comments so far? That you're also getting information from the company and that this makes it more of a conversation when you also come prepared with questions. The recruiter who I know is on the call says agreed. Your best experiences have been when you've done it back and forth. I'm so glad to hear that. It shows your interest in the company. It clarifies expectations. You're trying to find if this is the best fit for you. Somebody commented, it shows that you know what work environment is best for you. I'm going to repeat this. The people who are here on this call, I've spoken with you. I know who you all are. Not all of you, but a number of you on LinkedIn, in messages. You all are a really high achieving group. A lot of you are from Google. A lot of you are from Zoom, from Stripe, from Amazon. So I know who you guys are. And a lot of you are not from those companies, and you're a very high achieving group. So I know that you have social intelligence. And And the reason I say that is somebody said that this would be important to find out, does this work in both directions? I know you're not going to bulldoze the situation. I know that. So I know what I'm suggesting, you're not going to go too far because you've been in business a number of years. There are actually very few people in these sessions that are early in their career. I invite them, but you're all fairly senior in your job processes. Yes, a consultant mindset would suggest that you have questions ready to ask about the company. Yes, absolutely. And then we'll get to broad, going to detailed, starting from broad and going to detailed. And that's also advice from recruiters that I've worked with closely. It also makes better connection. It makes such a good connection. You're a human. Okay, so it seems like we're bought into this idea that yes, we are going to prepare questions to ask and look for the right time to ask those questions in the interview. Okay, great. Oh, it may not be a good fit at this time, but if you're memorable, then the recruiter will remember you. And if a new job comes up, if they're at a different company, like there are relationships that develop, you never know when or how. And even laughing, I invite you to have a good time at your interview. I know that may sound a little funny. And it can set you more at ease when you come with your own questions. So if there's kind of dead air, that won't happen. I'm going to take a little aside and talk about books that I love that also inform this information. There's a book that came out, I think about 2 years ago. It's called Humor, Seriously. It's written by two professors who teach at Stanford Business School. I'm an alum of Stanford Business School for the MBA and the PhD program. And this book is called Humor Seriously, but don't feel that you need to be a stand-up comedian. The point is how to use humor in business. But really, when you read this book, you'll find out that they don't necessarily mean humor. They actually mean just a lightness and a levity. They mean like a back and forthness, being able to enjoy the conversation, being able to pause and say, oh, look at what we just said, or isn't this unusual, or isn't this funny? And one piece of advice from this book, Humor Seriously, that I love, and I invite you to take this into an interview with a company in which you're the job candidate. I invite you to take what I'm about to say into when you are reaching out to a colleague or a friend of a friend to ask more information, to do like an informational interview. It's such a brilliant point. So the authors of this book say, when you're having a conversation with somebody, with anybody, you're talking, you're probably making notes, whether you're typing up notes or you're writing down notes. When that point comes up in the conversation in which you laugh, write that down and put a huge asterisk next to it. Put a star, put an asterisk, put a balloon, whatever you want, but circle it, but really make sure that you remember the point at which you laughed. Because when you write a note to that person later, the typical note is going to say, if you write a note, you don't absolutely have to write a note, but you likely will, especially when it's informational interviews and people have shared that time with you. When you write a note later, you're going to reference that thing, the part that was delightful, humorous, lightness, levity. You're going to reference that thing that you asterisked. So I invite you the next conversation that you have today by Zoom or by phone to write down what was a point of levity, mark it with an asterisk, and then when you write back to that person, highlight that. One of you says, what if the recruiter is not willing to engage in a back and forth? It's saying it could be a red flag that this might not be a good fit. It could be a red flag. It might also be that this person is incredibly busy. I mean, I got to hand it to recruiters and talent acquisition people. They sometimes have 8 calls almost back to back, and they make notes during and after the calls. It's intense. So if they're in not a great mood or they didn't have a chance to get up and get another cup of coffee, don't worry about it. Like all you can do is bring your own lightness to the table and it kind of an invitation for them to engage with you. If you're getting pushback and they just say, let's go on to the next question, go on to the next question. You won't likely get that, but when you do, just be responsive. That's the social and emotional intelligence that I know the people on the call have. Okay, we're bought in. Let's go on to our question. Our questions are going to be very simple today. So our questions are going to be of this format. Your opening question, your imagined question, your broad to detailed set of questions, your fun questions, and then your closing questions. So we're going to have kind of an opening question or two and a closing question, and then we'll have 3 in the middle. Ask whatever you think is most important of these to ask. We're going to drop the link to the workbook so you can see it. Go to the workbook and start to take notes along with what I'm saying. So some of these questions are specifically in the workbook, and some of them you can add. So if you're hearing something that I'm saying or that someone else is saying, you might add them. I gave you all over email a mini challenge, which was to think about when you have been in the interviewer chair and you were speaking with a job candidate, what are some questions that you enjoyed getting from the job candidate? Please write in some questions that either made you think or made you impressed with the job candidate. It could be interested. It could be just enjoy the conversation. So what are some questions that you've received when you were interviewing somebody? What are the resources I'll have available to help me be successful? What makes you the most excited about working here? Oh, how fun. What do you find most interesting about your role at this company? What keeps you up at night? To find out their challenges, absolutely. Somebody else plus one to the what keeps you up at night. What do you most enjoy about your job? Like, how fun is it going to be for them to answer that question? Yeah, just great. When you think about people who have or have not been successful at this company, what traits would describe those people? Delightful. You're getting into culture. You'll see some of the questions in the fun section are culture questions. And what traits have been successful at this company? What's one perk you would give up? Very interesting, very intriguing. What is one thing in your job you would do for free that you love it so much? These are really fun, you guys. What's one aspect of the culture that you like and one aspect that you think could be improved? That's almost one for one with one of the questions I'll be sharing for you. Yeah. Clarifying questions regarding the team, the manager, why I'm working at this company. Great. And actually the way that this person phrased it, who is a recruiter, by the way, those questions go from broad to detailed. So you start with the company and then the team and then the manager in your actual role. Absolutely. We'll talk about that specifically. What would you have done differently for a project they did before? I love this question. I think that's so fun because especially if you're noticing that these people are willing to admit where they made a mistake and where they see how they can do things differently, that makes it interesting to work with these folks. So this is one of these thinking questions. Your recruiter may not have time for a question like that, but the hiring manager and the other colleagues that you'll be meeting will likely have time for that question. So make a little distinction. What's your favorite product that your company created and sells? Oh, this is wonderful. I agree with you. So somebody said it could sound a little egotistical, but I'm flattered when people ask about articles I've written or been featured in. It shows research to completely agree. You are speaking with a person. You will know that person's name ahead of the interview. They're on your calendar invitation or in person. You can find out about that person and what they've written. Absolutely. Why not do that and ask about that? What would be one key you'd like to point out in the role I'm applying to? Very similar to what we've talked about at these sessions as the opening question. So what is a characteristic that would be really important in this role? What is most important for the person in this role to do? And this question that came up here is what would be one key that you'd like to point out for the person in this role? Awesome. Great. What's the biggest challenge problem you're having? Are failed experiments or ideas punished or celebrated? Really fun to hear, especially if you get to ask two people at a company, more than one. What is the one thing people miss in a colleague or a dream skill they would like to have present in their daily interaction? These are so conversational. I haven't seen jargon here at all. These are all about learning, but also showing that you're a human and showing that you're interested. Thank you. So fun. Okay, let's go through this format and cover a lot of what you've said and maybe some others. We're going to start with our opening question. We're going to go into our imagine, then broad to detailed, then fun, and then our closing question. Let's start with our opening question. You know this if you have been with me since week one. The opening question is a question that at the beginning, I'm going to go through this really simply because we have a whole big section on this. The opening question is, let's say I'm speaking to Samir and Samir is interviewing me. And let's say that I've passed the recruiter interview stage, the screening interview, and Samir is my potential hiring manager. Samir wrote the job description probably 2 months ago. Things may have changed for Samir at the company. When I'm interviewing with him right now, I want to find out exactly what's important for him in this role. How is this role going to help him? So I'm speaking with you very conversationally. I haven't phrased the question yet, but what do I want to know? At the beginning, right near the beginning of speaking with him, I would like to know, I've read the job description, I've researched the company, but for him, what's really going on? What is going to help him by having this role? What does he most want in the person in this role? What does he want to be? How does he want to work with the person in this role? So it's a set of questions, and I'll propose the one that I suggest, but it could be any of those set. Now, one comment before we get to the specific wording. Once I know a little more about what Samir wants in this role, because he's the hiring manager, then when Samir says, oh, Senya, tell me about yourself, all of my funnel of tell me about yourself, it's going to lead to the specific characteristics or problems or needs that Samir has in this role. Why? Because I know all of my background and I know what I can call on so that it's a fit here. And I'm going to take a little aside. I've gotten the question, Senya, is this like a little bit manipulative? You're only sharing a part of your story in the tell me about yourself. You're always only sharing part of your story in the tell me about yourself. The problem is, do you make that up by yourself? Do you have a conversation with yourself and create that funnel and say your one sentence, this is who I am, this is my background, this is what leads me to this role? Or do you do that a little bit? You've done it in general, but you do it a little bit more on the spot once you know what's important to the hiring manager. So I just kind of ask you to weigh those. Okay, so the opening question, and this is the first of all of our questions. The opening question is something along the lines, and feel free to jot down the wording you want in the workbook. The opening question is something along the lines of, for this role, I've read the job description. It seems like attention to detail and high-level strategy are two of the most important things. But you here sitting with me now, what is the most important thing for you in this role? Another way of asking that question is, for the person that you want to bring into this role, what are the characteristics of that person that are most going to help you in terms of moving this project forward, in terms of moving this department forward? So now you're asking a little bit about the interaction of your hiring manager and what that hiring manager would want in the working relationship with this person. Also super. Okay, so that is the opening question. What is most important in this role for the next 90 days? Great, great. It could also be what is most important for this role before the end of the year. So it could be a long-term view as well. Super. Whoever is asking the questions controls the conversation. Again, with our emotional intelligence, we're going to do that to the degree that it feels kind and thoughtful. Okay, second set of questions. So we've got 5. First set of questions was the opening question. I love this second set of questions. And this second question brings me to a book that's called Feedback Reimagined. It's by 2 friends and colleagues of mine, Pete Berridge and Jen Ostrich. I've been through their training. This is about how to get great feedback at small companies, at big companies. And the specific idea that leads into this second category of questions is, imagine, let's say that Stacy is my potential hiring manager and I'm about to interview with her. And let's say we're already in the conversation. So this is not right up at the beginning. To me, it feels a little too deep to start with something like this. So you've talked about your background, you've talked about some of the situations and the important things in Stacy's department. And then a question along these lines. So Stacy, imagine if you and I were to decide that this is the right fit and we were going to move forward. Imagine that we're sitting here in the same office in 3 months and we're working together. What will we have accomplished? What will our working relationship have been like? If everything's been as successful as it could possibly be, what will that have looked like? I would like to take your comments on a question like that. What do you think of a question like that? So again, not near the beginning of the conversation. Stacy, if we were to figure out that this is a good fit between my background in this company for this role, imagine that we are here in these same chairs in this conference room in 3 months. What will our work together have been like in that 3 months if it is as successful as it could have possibly been? What would we have accomplished in those 3 months? One person just wrote, you essentially know what success looks like, what the expectations are. And I would even add to what you're saying, you know what the expectations are in the ideal, in the most successful, in the best version of this world of you potentially working with this hiring manager. How do you spot a red flag in answers to that? Let's see. I don't know that there is a red flag because it's so, personal isn't the right term. It's so specific to what you would like out of the working relationship. So I don't think anybody's going to tell you anything lousy like, I'm going to want to micromanage you for the next 3 months. Nobody's going to say that. People might say, and I have heard people say this, I've seen people back out of their job candidacy. I have heard people say, I'm in this department, we work 80-hour weeks, we have this project and this project and this project, we don't have a way of cutting those 80-hour weeks, it's intense, it's great, it's a good group of people, but it's intense, it's just a little, and people have backed out, like thoughtfully, quietly emailing in the next few days. So I wouldn't call it a red flag, I would just say, see what it's like. And I would say it's a little bit the opposite of the red flag, because this imagine question, there's a field related to positive psychology, which is one of my background areas, called appreciative inquiry. And it's about asking questions and appreciating like growth. So appreciation in stock, for example. What you ask about grows. So you're asking about this positive, amazing possible relationship you could have with this person. So in fact, I would be a little surprised if major red flags come up for this question. It's like the person's paint. You can even use this phrasing. You could say, could you paint me a picture of what it would look like if we will have, again, if we find that this is a fit, if we will have worked together for the next 3 months, what will that have looked like? What will have been the highs? What will we be excited to have brought to market? So I'd say less red flags, more like dreaming together. The reason I bring up this area of appreciative inquiry is there's a set of questions called the dream questions, like you dream together, you imagine together, you co-create in a sense, and you brainstorm it. I would say one other benefit is that the person actually starts to see you as a possibility in that chair and in that seat and in that role. Some folks are saying you don't want to work in a vacuum without stand-ups and without building relationships. Absolutely. If you thrive in collaboration and you're told that this is a silo role, you'll learn. That's great. Thank you for answering the person's question. What our recruiter on the call is saying, you're making the interviewer imagine you in this position. Yes, absolutely. Here are some other aspects, and feel free to jot this down in your workbook. Just like this, imagine we're sitting here in 3 months. You could ask detailed things like, what will we be celebrating in 3 months? So that's even more of a high point. What will we have accomplished that we're celebrating? What will we be planning then at 3 months for the future? So you decide, and you might play it in the moment. Another tweaks on that same imagine question are, and this is a very common consulting question, and remember, you're a bit in the consulting mindset. I find that this question is, the words are a little harsher, so I prefer that imagine phrasing, but also want to give you this as an option. What would success look like? Success for our department, for our team, for the products we're putting out. What would success look like? It is also very important and valid and sometimes just the right thing to ask, what would success in my role look like? And sometimes they know exactly and sometimes they don't. But now you're asking about success for the team and for the department. So implying some collaboration. And then I really love this question, this version of that same imagine question, but I need to say you have to have a little guts to ask it this way because it could seem a little bit new agey. I think there's a way to just the way that you ask, the tone, to make it thoughtful and respectful as opposed to woo-woo, but here it is. What would the person in this role make possible for you? I'll tell you the kinds of answers I've seen for this. Well, I actually want to get out of the nitty-gritty of doing the sales process, so as soon as I hire this person, I can be at the strategic level and planning with the CEO. Great, I'm here to do the nitty-gritty, that's great. So what would this person doing a really strong job and moving this work forward for the team, what would that make possible for you in your role? So again, judge your vibe with this potential hiring manager. Next category is the third category. So this is, imagine that this is a big cylinder and that's going to a small cylinder. What I have heard a lot from recruiters, so the question that's coming up that I keep deflecting is, what would you like to ask the recruiter? So this is an excellent set of questions for the recruiter, excellent set of questions for the hiring manager. The idea is that you're starting broad and then you're going more and more detailed. What does that mean? It means you're starting at the company level and things that you may have read in a recent press release, in the news, on the company website, even on LinkedIn by some of the CEO, the CFO. You're starting broad, then you're going more team level, and you may have 1 or 2 questions about the team. That could be about the culture, it could be about the team dynamics, it could be about what does the team do really well in working together. And then it gets even more detailed, which is you could ask, and you have to figure out what the right questions for you are, but what is most important day to day? If I just think about, you might ask this, it depends on your specific job. If I think about the typical day, what would I be doing? So you don't want to come across as too not knowing because you've done very similar work, so you know what your day would have been like, but you may want to know what is specific to this company. Or you may preface it with, hey, when I've held this role before, here's what a typical day looks like. What might be different here? Let's talk through some of the specific questions, but we're starting at a company level. It could even be at an industry level. That's actually fascinating. My most recent industry is climate and energy tech. And with the Inflation Reduction Act, there's so many things going on in energy tech, investments, different technologies developing. So there could be some questions at the industry level, which your recruiter may or may not want to get into, but your hiring manager certainly would be open to. So industry level, company level, team level, and the actual working with this manager level. Let me ask you, would somebody put in a company level question? What's a question that you could ask at the company level that would be something that you would want to know And that also would be something that the person could answer, the recruiter or the hiring manager. So anybody can answer it. Yeah, great. So one of you says industry level examples would be great, especially when you're trying to determine long-term viability. 100%. Because remember, this is an interview that's two ways, that's both directions. I might tweak what somebody just wrote. So somebody said, what is the company's mission statement and what are the pillars of success? I think you may be able to find the mission statement. So that's actually a nice way of showing that you've done the research. I found that the mission statement is this. What leads to the success of that mission statement? What are the pillars of success? What are the avenues to success? How will the company meet this mission statement? Beautiful. Very broad. The recruiter or the hiring manager or the other folks you'll meet, they can answer in any way you like. I'm an executive coach. The more open-ended your questions are, the better. And this question is so open-ended. What leads to that? What are the directions? What are the avenues that lead to success in this mission statement? Brilliant. Brilliant because you're not pinpointing. Like, for example, let's say a company makes Post-its and I can get it out here in pens. So if a company makes Post-its and pens and your question is, do you think the company is going to go more towards 70% Post-its and 30% pens? Closed-ended question. You're not giving them the chance to pull out their expertise. So open-ended question, what is going to lead to success towards this mission statement? Brilliant. Also, excellent question. Given the current state of the economy, what challenges is your company facing? Yes. For a young company, how does supply chain issue impact your business? So important in this world. Exactly. Okay, wonderful. Okay, so we've done business level. Let's give me a few team level. I'm not showing the ones in the workbook because you're hitting them. You're hitting all of them. Team level. What are good team level questions for you to learn and also for somebody to be able to answer, including the recruiter? So I've gotten a couple of questions of Senya, what questions are going to work with the recruiter? So please tell me what are good team level, department level questions. Okay, I'll give a couple of categories and see what wording you all say. Department challenges. So just like somebody asked about the company challenges and how does the company expect to meet this challenge? Department challenges. And I would say, in addition to the opening question and the fit and hesitation question at the end, you've got to walk out of that interview knowing what the big challenge is or are. You've got to know the challenge. If you walk out and you don't know what's a pain point for your potential manager, you won't have great follow-up discussions. You won't be able to hit on those in your interviews with other members of the team. You've got to know the challenge. So at the department level, maybe this department can't affect the company level challenge, but you've got to walk out knowing the department level challenge. How would you and others describe the team vibe? Super. So we've got a few culture questions. Also, love the culture questions. Love them. What do you think contributes most to your team's camaraderie? Super. What does the current team look like and how can I add value? Again, makes the hiring manager think of you in that seat, or the recruiter, because the recruiter also knows that team very well. What are the issues that the team is facing and how can I add to solving those issues? Brilliant. Departmental challenges and also conversational, right? So when I say departmental challenges, that almost sounds jargony. This is super conversational, again, from the recruiter on the call. But what are the issues that the team is facing and how can I add to solving those challenges? This may be a delicate question. So if you're interviewing for the manager position, how open is the team to such a change of manager? Great, because you also want to know that vibe. What is it? Does it happen rare or often? What's the decision-making hierarchy? So for that question, just be thoughtful because that could rub a person a little bit the wrong way because they might think, oh, is she questioning my decision-making hierarchy? No, you're not. You're actually just curious. How do decisions get made? What happens? What's effective about how decisions get made? What could be more effective about how decisions get made? Great. That shows you as somebody who really wants to help get things done. How does your team recognize a win? Awesome culture question. So fun. Oh my gosh, you guys, you're pros at this. How's the team currently operating and how do you see this role fitting in? Brilliant. It gives you steps to think about when you come in for your first 100 days, your first 90 days. How well does your team work cross-functionally and what would you like to be better? So just, you may have heard me say this before. What's effective? What could be more effective? I want to absolutely call out this book, Feedback Reimagined by Pete Berridge and Jen Ostrich. And just on a personal note, I've taken their system. I love their system. A lot of coaches that I know I've recommended and they've taken their system. The reason I bring up that book is they're masters of what is working really well, what's effective, what could work even better. So notice they're not saying what's working really well, what's not working really well. That's fine. And you and I have often asked those questions, but just think of how energizing it is to ask what's working really well, what could work even better. Because again, we're doing that appreciative inquiry, kind of dreaming together. What could work even better? How often does the team meet? Very detailed level questions now. Are new leadership roles generally filled internally or externally? Great, lots of information. For team level questions, this person likes questions that start with, can you tell me more about? Yeah, these are open-ended questions. Can you tell me more about how the team makes decisions? Can you tell me more about how the team gets a product to market fast? Can you tell me more about what the team's concerns are for the next 3 months in terms of deliverables? Great. For anybody who doesn't know, the email list is at jobsearch2023.com. That is the only way, if you sign up for the email list there, that I can tell you about the next one that's happening. You must be on the mailing list. That is at jobsearch2023.com. We've done the opening question. We've done the imagine set of questions. We've done the funnel from broad to narrow. We haven't done as many questions of like, what would I do in a typical day or what's effective, but I think we're getting the sense. Now, fun. We have to cover fun questions. And we've actually previously covered the closing question, which is fit and hesitation, but we'll do it again. Fun. Okay. Fun, fun, fun. Okay, I'm going to go with culture, then surprising, and then not asking. So those 3 categories of fun questions. I love culture questions. They can also go into the broad to detailed set of questions. I love them. As a chief people officer, I love talking about the culture of our company. So when people would ask, or when they looked at things on our website and said, oh, I saw this, or I saw an example of this engineer doing this, I love that. That showed me interest. Here are some questions that you could ask about culture. What's an example of the culture at this company? Can you share with me a story that demonstrates the culture of this company? And then just listen. It's so enjoyable because people know what you're asking. You're asking about integrity, you're asking about collaboration. They might go back, if they're fluent in it, to the values of the company, but just ask for a story that demonstrates the culture of the company. You may not have time, so these are all optional questions, but if you have questions about culture, more about culture. If the New York Times were to write an article about this company, what would it write about the company culture? What would it highlight? What would employees be saying in unison to the New York Times without getting prompted? What would be the things that we would see about company culture? Here's one that's relevant to what some of you have said before. What would you change or augment about the company culture? And again, just pause and listen. One of the deepest people I know, it's someone I really respect a lot. This is the question that this person has asked in interviews when this person has been interviewing, which is, again, about the culture. What gets rewarded at this company? And again, just pause and listen. I'll give you an example that happened with me when I was interviewing with a company. I asked a question, something along this lines, but I didn't know this phrasing then yet. And so what got told to me is, well, actually what gets rewarded is a little bit of a hero culture. And we want to change that. We don't think that's the right thing. We want to be more deliberate, more thoughtful. But if someone swoops in and fixes something and whoof, then we rally around that person and say, this is so great, thank you, thank you. But we don't want to be doing that going forward. Useful, very interesting to hear what gets rewarded. Let me go on to 2 others that I just love. This is a question that you could use at any stage of your career, from early in your career to applying to a CEO role, which is you're speaking with, let's say, the hiring manager. You could also ask the recruiter. There's just so much to ask the recruiter, from the broad to the detailed questions. This is something, once you've gotten into the middle of the conversation. Let's say my hiring manager, let's give them another name. Let's say it's Wei Li. So Wei Li is my hiring manager. And I ask Wei Li, you've been at the company for 3 years now. Since you've joined, what's been the most surprising to you? This used to be my ace question. I now have a more ace question, but this used to be my ace question. I would just pause because it makes people think. So now I hope you all multiply this question forward and go and ask this question to all the companies you'll be speaking. People don't usually ask this question, and so it's surprising for people to get the surprise question. So I'll just repeat it again. You've been at the company for about 3 years. What's been the most surprising to you in this time? It could be that they had expectations when they started and something was surprising. It could be that something happened, like the company moved the direction of its products or got a large funding round. So it's going to be interesting to you, and it's going to be interesting to them. Okay, we've talked about culture. We've talked about the surprising question, and this did not come from me. 2 years ago, I taught this series of sessions to a group of about 8 or 9 execs, and this question came from one of the execs who went out and just one day started asking this question. He shared it with us, and everybody then started asking this question. The question is, what do I not want to know about this role? So tell me, what do you think happens when somebody in the job candidate chair says, what do I not want to know about this role? Yeah, all I'm seeing is emojis, like you guys are clapping, you're laughing. What happens? What happens with the dynamic? What happens with the interaction when somebody says, what do I not want to know about this role? I guess it's a little reverse psychology. I wasn't even thinking that far. No, actually, you never get booted from the process. No, because the way you ask, let me give you two examples. That this is going to be my acting debut for all of you. What do I not want to know about this role? Like, oh my gosh, that person should get booted. That version of Senya, you don't want to work with a person who's coming in and saying that. But if a person leans back and smiles, and it's the middle of the conversation, and I say, what do I not want to know about this role? Everybody cracks up. So every time that someone has come back and said, I asked this, everybody cracked up. The mood lightened. If it was an interview panel, everybody on the panel cracked up. They kind of thought about it. They thought about the challenges of the company. They answered. They really answered. And it's so human, especially in this very formal and deliberate and drawn out process. It's so human. So that is my ACE question. You're asking a very clear question, which is, could this create a negative feeling of distrust? I've never seen it. I have seen this question now asked probably 100 times. I've only seen people like, oh, really? Well, let me tell you. Let me tell you what you should not be asking about this role. What do I not want to know about this role? It's just great. Can you ask that to a recruiter or save it? Let me ask the resident recruiter here who is helping us out. What would be a recruiter reaction to being asked that about a specific role that the recruiter is doing a screening interview for? Someone says how the interviewer responds could say something about their culture. Oh, that's great. So the recruiter has come back and said, this would be funny and I would be honest. You know, in my world of giving trainings or workshops or seminars, this is the point when I should end. Like, it's such a good question. This is the point when I should end. I realize that. I'm going to summarize everything for you all, but it's just, I love this question myself so much. So I'm going to give you the last one, which you know, and I'll link to where you can see more of it, the closing question. The closing question. So you've spoken, let's say, to the recruiter for a half hour, and then you can ask. And again, our wonderful recruiter who's here with us, and let me know how you are with this question. At the very end, you can say, now that we've gotten some time to speak, well, where do you feel that this may be a fit between my background and this role? And in a moment, I'll ask you, where do you have hesitations? So you're asking, I'm saying about the fit, and in a moment, I'll ask you about hesitations. The reason I super encourage you to practice this question with someone else and then be comfortable enough with it that you can ask it in an interview is because then you're going to get a clearer yes or no. You don't want to be strung along for 3 weeks, 4 weeks. An answer that would tell you that this is not a good fit is if they say, oh yeah, the fit could be here and here. Where do I have hesitations? If the person tells you, we're interviewing a lot of amazing candidates, or we have a lot of candidates who are really strong here, you can take that as a hint that you may not be at the top of that pile. And that's information. I tend to want to know information. Some people don't, and you want to keep it a little open, and that is fine, and that is your choice. I can confirm that I just asked this question in an interview, and it worked. Not only did they answer, but they were super impressed by the question. I'm so glad. I'm actually really glad. I'm really glad. And I'll tell you why it's so critical to ask it. First, I just want to say this is a weird question to start asking, so practice with friends. Just actually literally practice saying it, because it's a weirdly worded question, because you don't want to ask the fit but not ask the hesitation. So it's, I'm asking you a fit, and in a moment I'll ask you about hesitation. I will repeat it one more time, and then I'll tell you what I think is the biggest benefit of it. Now that we've had a chance to speak with each other, where do you see that this may be a fit between my background and this role? So notice I'm asking between my background and this role, or my experience in this role. I'm not saying it's a personal thing, but between my background and this role. Where do you see the fit between my background and this role? And in a moment, I'll ask you what your hesitations are. So I'm implying that there could be hesitations. And so often when people ask this, they get the answer, I don't have hesitations. Great, great to know. Maybe they're not telling you the truth, but maybe they are. You can only get the info that you can get. Why do you want to ask this? If someone has a hesitation, you want them to bring it forward right now. So if they love you and they say, I'm not really sure about the remote hybrid, I really think this would work better if you're in the office 4 days a week, but we advertise it as a 3 days a week in the office. So not totally sure, just we have to think it through, look at the other candidates. You can address that. You can say, I'm a very in-office person, if you are, and that would fit. Travel can come up. We think it's great, but you seem a little hesitant on the travel. We think this is great, but we don't know if you've had as much experience in this area. That's where you can say, thank you so much for sharing that with me. May I offer a story that addresses what you're talking about? May I offer some information that addresses what you're talking about? And if you don't have information, then that's info for you as well. So let me back up a little. You're asking this question, you're getting the fit, you're getting the hesitation. The fit part, you can actually share with other people that you speak with. I was speaking with Mark and he mentioned that the reason that this may be a fit is because of the strategy work that I've done. And this is a highly strategic role. And then for the hesitation though, you can address it. It's your one chance to possibly address it. Oh my gosh, great. Someone mentioned a hesitation that was based on an assumption they had made during this conversation, and this person was able to address it, to correct it and reinforce that then in their follow-up note. Super. Yes, 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 yes. Okay, what did we talk about? We talked about the opening question. That's the one that sets context and lets you ask the hiring manager what's most important for them. We talked about the imagine questions. Those are the questions about if you and I were sitting here in 3 months and we've done all this great work, what would that look like? What would it have been? What would our challenges be? What would we be planning next? The broad to detailed question, from industry to company to team to you and how you would work in this group. Then we talked about the fun questions. So that's culture, that's most surprising, and that's the what do I not want to be asking about about this role. And then the closing question, which is the fit and hesitation question. My usual question to you, what is your one takeaway from today? So one single takeaway, a single takeaway. Oh, thank you so much. A few of you are saying such a great session. Thank you. I really appreciate that. Thank you. Funneling from broad to specific. Excellent. Don't be hesitant on asking questions. Wonderful. The recruiter said that he learned the what do I not want to know. I'm glad. I'm really glad. I'm looking forward to hearing your experience with asking it. Being able to interview with a more direct understanding of where I am in the process. Oh my gosh, I'm so glad to hear that. Sprinkling questions naturally throughout the interview, making it a flow, making it a flow. Yes, yes, yes. Making the interviewer reflect on their own experiences. Oh my gosh, because then it's about both of you. Using an imagined question, asking open-ended questions, and making it lighthearted. Yes, humor seriously. Have questions from a variety of perspectives and levels. The power of an imagined question. I agree. I think that one's just, it's so fun to work on together. And having plenty of questions ready in multiple categories. You guys rock. This has been the most interactive session we've done. I've asked you, you've answered, I've asked you, which is actually ironic because it's the session on questions. I really think you guys rock. I see where you are. Some of you are also emailing me. Feel free to email me anytime. As always, do something for your health, do something for your career moving forward, and do something that's a connection action. So choose something for health, sleep, movement, nutrition, drinking water, meditation, something for your health. Choose something for connecting with someone, and choose something from this. Here's your mini challenge, and the last words I'll say. My mini challenge for you is that you actually start asking some of these questions to your friends, to friends who are looking for a job, to friends and family. These questions require practice. I had to go and get the right wording for the question. Don't do that. Have them at the ready. Have them really ready, really practice, really excited about asking these kinds of questions. Go forth, have fun. See you soon. All the best.